In the winter of 1880, a blizzard hit Dakota Territory on October 15th, before the harvest was even fully in. By December, the trains had stopped running. By January, they would not run again until May. Settlers ground their seed wheat into flour just to eat once a day. They burned twisted hay for heat. One family was found frozen at their table, the fire long dead, their hands still wrapped around cups that had never gotten warm. And in the middle of that same territory, one man's cabin held 68 degrees Fahrenheit, and his stove had gone cold 6 hours before. His neighbors had laughed at him all summer, and some still couldn't explain what they'd seen come spring. But the physics of what he built and why it worked is something you can understand in the next few minutes. And once you do, you'll never look at a wall the same way again. His name was Heinrich Brandt. He had arrived in Dakota Territory in the spring of 1878 from Württemberg, in the southwest corner of Germany, with $31 in his coat pocket and a specific memory he could not shake: the stone house his grandfather had built into a hillside outside Stuttgart. A house so stable in temperature that the family stored wine and smoked meat in the cellar year-round because it never got too cold and never got too warm. He was 34 years old, a former stonemason's apprentice, broad-shouldered, quiet, and in the eyes of the other settlers at the Yankton land office, immediately peculiar. Every other man who filed a claim that spring began building within 2 weeks, because the Homestead Act required settlers to build and prove up within 5 years, and the social pressure of a frontier community where everyone watched everyone else meant that a man without 4 walls and a roof by August was a man who didn't belong. The typical approach was fast and logical. Fell the largest available timber, notch the ends, stack the logs, chink the gaps with whatever was available. Clay, moss, mud, animal hair, raise the roof, move in. Total build time was 3 to 5 weeks for a single man with neighbors helping. Heinrich did not break ground on his walls for 7 weeks after filing, because what he did first was dig. He hired 2 men from the nearest settlement, Clem Adair, 40, and his son-in-law, Roy Pruitt, 22, to help him excavate a full basement, 8 feet deep, 20 feet by 24 feet, with walls of dry stacked and mortared limestone pulled from the creek bed half a mile east of his claim. The neighbors watched from their finished cabins, and the comments started almost immediately. "He's building himself a grave," Clem Adair reportedly told his wife that first week. "I've seen what happens to men who waste a summer digging holes instead of building walls." Roy Pruitt told people at the Yankton General Store that the German was either a genius or the kind of fool who'd be dead before Christmas, and the prevailing opinion, by about 3 to 1, favored the second explanation. What none of them knew, what most of them could not have known, because the physics had not yet been written down in any American building manual, was what the earth was actually doing, 8 feet below their feet, in all seasons and all weather. The ground at the surface is a mirror of the sky above it. So when it's negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit outside, the top inch of soil is negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit. But the further down you go, the more that connection weakens. At 4 feet, the frost line in Dakota Territory, the earth no longer freezes at all in a normal winter. At 6 feet, the seasonal swing nearly disappears. At 8 feet, exactly where Heinrich was building his stone walls, the ground in that region holds a stable temperature of 48 to 52 degrees Fahrenheit every month of the year. Whether the surface is baking at 95 degrees Fahrenheit in July or locked under 3 feet of snow in February. The Earth at depth has its own temperature, sourced from the planet's interior, and it does not respond to the weather above. Heinrich was anchoring his home to a thermal floor that could never drop below 48 degrees, no matter what the sky did. The stone walls he raised around that excavation added another layer of physics that his neighbors were equally unaware of. They thought of stone as cold, which it is, to the touch, because it conducts heat away from skin quickly. But stone does something wood cannot do at any thickness, which is store heat. And 1/8-inch limestone wall, once warmed to 65 degrees by a morning fire, holds that energy the way a cast iron skillet holds heat long after it's been pulled from the flame. The specific heat of limestone, the scientific measure of how much energy it takes to raise a pound of it. 1 degree is 0.21. 7 BTUs per pound per degree Fahrenheit, which means Heinrich's 4 basement walls combined contained roughly 13,800 pounds of stone per wall section. Heated just 30 degrees from their natural ground temperature to a comfortable living range, those walls stored approximately 360,000 BTUs, which is the energy equivalent of burning 20 pounds of seasoned oak wood, held silently in the stone and radiating back into the space over the next 12 to 18 hours while the fire sat cold. But the basement was only half the system, and this is where even the people who'd begun to grudgingly respect his digging lost the thread entirely. When Heinrich finally began his above-ground walls in late July, he did not build one wall, he built two. He framed an inner wall of squared pine logs, 8 inches thick, then left a gap of 10 inches, then framed an outer wall of the same material. 2 complete log walls, separated by almost a foot of open space. From a distance, it looked like the walls of a small fort, thick, imposing, obviously more work than anything else in the settlement. And up close, it looked like waste, because 10 inches of air between 2 walls could have been more living space or more storage. One of the German farmers 2 miles east, a man named Franz Keller, who had emigrated from Bavaria 3 years earlier and considered himself Heinrich's cultural peer, if not his building superior, walked over one afternoon and stood staring at the double wall for a long time before saying, in German, that Heinrich had either lost his mind or was building a barn and had forgotten to mention it. He said the gap was heat given freely to the wind, and that a man could throw paper money into the fire and get the same result. He went home and told his wife that the Württemberg man would not survive his first winter and that someone should probably arrange to purchase his stove before January. Franz Keller's cabin that winter dropped to 28 degrees Fahrenheit inside on the worst nights, and his family slept in their coats. Here is what Franz did not understand, and what modern building science has since measured with precision. A bare air gap between 2 walls, left open at top and bottom, is not insulation. Moving air carries heat away, and convection, the circulation of warm air rising and cool air falling, means an open gap is almost useless thermally. Heinrich knew this, so he packed every inch of that 10-inch gap with sawdust from the mill in Yankton, mixed with hydrated lime to resist insects and moisture. Sawdust insulates at approximately R2, 0 to R2, 5 per inch, and 10 inches of tightly packed sawdust lime fill delivers R20 to R25 before the 2 log walls are even counted. Adding an 8-inch pine log on each side at roughly R8 each brought Heinrich's total wall assembly to somewhere between R36 and R41. A modern 2x6 stud wall with fiberglass bat insulation achieves R19 to R21, which means his 1,878 frontier wall outperformed it. The physics of what he'd built was this. His cabin sat on a thermal foundation that never dropped below 48 degrees Fahrenheit, and the massive stone basement walls, once warmed, continued radiating heat upward through the floorboards for 8 to 12 hours after any fire went cold, because heat moves through 18 inches of limestone slowly over many hours. The double walls above trapped everything generated inside, cutting heat loss to roughly 1/3 of what a single-wall cabin experienced, and the basement itself, connected to earth that sat at a permanent 50 degrees Fahrenheit, meant the lower half of his home had a thermal head start every single night that no neighbor could match. The settlers around him were fighting winter while Heinrich had arranged things so that winter couldn't fully reach him. The blizzard that proved it came on the night of October 15th, 1880. There was no warning, in the sense that anyone acted on it. The sky had been strange for 2 days, and Heinrich had noticed the cattle pressing against the south fence, which he knew from his grandfather's farm in Germany meant pressure was dropping. He spent the 13th and 14th banking his stone basement walls with additional earth on the exterior, bringing in an extra 2 weeks of firewood, and sealing every door threshold with rolled wool, while his neighbors finished their harvests and watched him with that familiar mixture of amusement and pity and did nothing different. The storm hit at 11 o'clock on a Wednesday night, and by morning the temperature had fallen from 44 degrees Fahrenheit to -12 degrees Fahrenheit, a swing of 56 degrees in under 10 hours. Wind drove at 45 miles per hour, packing snow so dense it moved like a solid thing. By the end of the first week of November, the settlement was locked in. 3 families had lost cattle they couldn't reach through the drifts, and the Adair family's cabin, single-wall logs, no basement. Standard chinking dropped to 31 degrees Fahrenheit inside when their firewood ran short. Clem Adair, the same man who had watched Heinrich dig all summer and called it a grave, spent 6 nights in his own home wearing every piece of clothing he owned, his wife and 2 daughters wedged together under every blanket available, a single candle burning for the psychological comfort of any warmth at all. Heinrich's cabin across the 2 worst weeks held between 61 degrees Fahrenheit and 71 degrees Fahrenheit, depending on how recently the stove had been fed, and his firewood consumption was roughly 1/3 of what Franz Keller burned in the same period to keep his cabin barely above freezing. He had extra, and he used some of it to warm enough water for the Keller family when their water barrel froze solid on the second night. During the worst 3-day stretch in January, when the temperature outside recorded at -38 degrees Fahrenheit and wind chill on the exposed prairie reached what modern meteorologists calculate as approximately -72 degrees Fahrenheit, Heinrich let his stove go cold for a full night deliberately, to test what he had built the way a craftsman tests a joint under stress. When he woke at dawn 6 hours after the last coal had gone gray, his thermometer read 54 degrees Fahrenheit. The stone basement, pulling its baseline heat from ground that sits at 50 degrees Fahrenheit regardless of what the sky is doing, had kept the cabin's floor-level temperature from collapsing, and the double walls had held every degree generated the day before. And the system had worked exactly as a system, not a stove sitting inside a thin box, but an integrated thermal structure that managed heat as a stored resource rather than a constant demand. The actual winter of 1880 to 1881 ran from October through April, 7 months. Trains into the region stopped running in late December and did not resume until May. Settlers ground seed wheat, their only hedge against next year's failure, into coarse flour because eating the seed was better than starving this year. They burned twisted hay, which burns hot but fast, because the wood had run out. 3 families in the broader settlement area left in February, concluding they had been wrong about what survival on this land required, and 1 family lost a child to a respiratory illness accelerated by weeks in a cabin that could not stay above freezing. Heinrich Brandt's family, his wife Marta, his sons Karl and Dieter, and a daughter born that December named Elsa, came through the winter in better physical condition than nearly any other family in the settlement. Marta Brandt, writing to her sister in Germany in April of 1881, described the winter as harsh but manageable, and noted that they had never needed to sleep in their coats, had always had warm food at 2 meals a day, and had enough firewood remaining in March that Heinrich was able to sell a quarter cord to the Adair family. By the following spring, 4 neighboring settlers had asked Heinrich to help them rebuild their cabins, and Franz Keller, the Bavarian who had stood at the double wall and called it madness, spent 3 weeks that summer filling the gap in his own walls with sawdust and lime. He never apparently acknowledged the connection between that choice and what he had witnessed that winter, but he made it. What Heinrich Brandt built in 1878 is not a historical curiosity. The physics he used are the same physics that modern building scientists call the double envelope, a concept formally named and developed in 1977 by architect Lee Porter Butler, who designed a house within a house separated by an air plenum, with earth-coupled mass below and insulated shells above. The Kimmel House in Virginia, built on Butler's principles, used less than half a cord of wood in its first winter and maintained indoor temperatures above 60 degrees Fahrenheit throughout. The University of Toronto's nested thermal envelope design simulation showed an 85% reduction in heating energy compared to a conventional building. Heinrich Brandt, a stonemason's apprentice from Württemberg working with limestone and sawdust and 2 walls instead of 1, built a frontier version of this system nearly a century before anyone wrote the equations. The school children's blizzard of January 12, 1888, which killed at least 235 people across the same Dakota plains, including 213 children who never made it home from school and froze within sight of buildings they could not reach through zero visibility. Wind killed people in structures built exactly the way Heinrich's neighbors had originally built theirs, with single walls, no basement, no thermal mass, and no stored heat for when the stove went cold and the storm made going outside for more wood impossible. At Fargo that day, the temperature recorded -47 degrees Fahrenheit, and at Neche, Dakota Territory, -58 degrees Fahrenheit. At the moment those numbers were being etched into weather station logs, a house with stone mass and double walls held its warmth for hours without a fire, exactly the way Heinrich had tested his own cabin 8 winters before. The man who digs deeper than his neighbors, who builds twice when once seems sufficient, who hauls stone when logs would be faster, is not showing off. He is solving a problem that his neighbors haven't admitted is a problem yet, and the laughter is almost always loudest right before the temperature drops.